What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Bludborn, and in today's video we're actually going to be covering something that came along with the Umbar craft guilds, and that is upgradable gear. Now before we get into the video, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, like it if you like the video, and also be sure to comment. Let me know what you think about the upgradable gear down in the comments below. And as always, make sure you're checking out my live content over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Bludborn. All right, so what is this upgradable gear? Well, on December 12th, Lord of the Rings Online actually posted an article on their website with the Corsairs of Umbar craft guilds. And one of the things that is mentioned in there is the upgradable items. In its basic form, what it looks like is you start off with an item that you craft that is fully tradable to other players in the economy. And then as you tier it up 3 additional times, it does become bound when you start upgrading it. There are some additional items that are required called Lux Stones, and those will be basically the rare item that you'll need to craft as well to do the upgrade process, along with the previously crafted item. Now to get started with the upgradable gear, you're going to need to go visit your Umbar guild leader in the Umbar craft hall in the city of the Corsairs. From your guild leader, you're going to notice several recipes that you can acquire, and that they are gated by both reputation with the guild and also currency. Now, for the sake of consistency in this video, I'm going to refer to the different levels of the upgradable gear by different tiers. So we're going to do tier 1 through 4. Tier 1 is going to be the baseline. What you will notice with these recipes is that the first several of them don't require any other reputation other than just being a member of the guild. So tier 1 and tier 2 are craftable right away, but it is gated by the currency, which will take several days to acquire. A side note about the currency, good news for people who have a lot of alts that are crafters and whatnot, is the Umbari craft guild marks are bound to account on acquire, so some of you guys might be able to make a lot of gear really quickly, which is great. I myself am really focusing on one character this go around, so it's going to take me a little bit more time to actually craft up these things, but I'm not in any hurry because we're really not looking at instances until probably around February at the earliest. Once you do get into the tier 3 and tier 4 recipes, you will notice that those will have apprentice and journeyman standing requirements as well. So as I said earlier, you are going to need Lux Stones to do this. Now currently you can get 2 Lux Stones a week through doing your weekly guild quest in Umbar. You can also obtain Lux settings through the Comb Forester event. However, that has been hit and miss when it's available, and they turn it on and off pretty frequently. So it's not been super reliable, but you can get Lux Stones through that as well. Now, before we actually get started crafting some of these items, let's actually take a look at some of the recipes and what they look like and what is needed with them. On a side note, I won't be able to show everything, such as the multiple outputs for some of the higher tier ones, simply because it is gated behind the reputation, and currently I am still an initiate in the guild. So starting out with recipes, you are going to have your base Umbari Mastercraft recipe that does not have an adjacent Lux Stone setting recipe. However, it does require the initial item of a Lux Stone. Now also for each tier, there is another recipe that looks very similar, and this one is going to be the Umbari Mastercrafted guild recipe as well. However, this is the one that is actually going to give you a box, and this is the one that will use the Umbar Writ of Trade that we talked about in the previous video. What this does is it will create a picker box that will let you pick a different craft, so say tailor, but you'll actually get the metalsmith output. So this is a way that you can actually give your craft guild items to other people to allow them to have some of the crafted recipes. So again, each tier will have one of those teachable boxes in it. So be careful when you're actually picking your recipes and make sure which one you are getting, if you were trying to get one of the teachable boxes or if you were actually trying to get the crafted recipe for your craft. Moving on to tier 2 is where we actually start to get the multiple outputs and we start to get the bindings that happen. So again, anything that you make tier 2 through 4 is going to be bound to you. Once you get into tier 2 also, you are going to have an adjacent Lux Stone recipe that you're going to need to purchase and craft as well. The good news here is that these are not one-shot recipes. These are ones that you learn and you permanently have them. So once you spend your currency, you don't need to do it again. You simply just need to craft the items. So the same thing applies going into tier 3. When we have the recipes here, those are also going to have an adjacent Lux Stone setting recipe to go with it that you are going to need to purchase and craft to make the upgrade. Same thing with tier 4. You're going to see the same type of thing with the recipe and the adjacent Lux Stone setting recipe. So let's actually go over some examples of what this looks like. So in this case, I'm a metalsmith and we're going to be crafting a helm. One other side note, after doing 5 days of the crafting dailies and completing the weekly, you do have enough of the currency to basically get yourself into tier 2 with the reputation as well. So since I've actually already purchased this recipe, we're going to go ahead and craft the master crafted helmet. Again, this does not have any multiple outputs and it also is freely tradable to other players. It's going to require 1 Lux Stone and 8 Umbari ingots. Since tier 2 does not require any additional reputation to craft, we're going to go ahead and move right into the next tier of tier 2, which is going to be the versatile master crafted helmet. So again, be mindful, since this is tier 2, we do have multiple selectable outputs and we do have binding that happens. So as soon as this is made, it is going to become bound to account. So as we talked about earlier, these tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4 recipes are going to require a Lux Stone recipe, ingots, and also the previous crafted item. So in this case, for the versatile master crafted helmet, it's going to require the previously crafted master crafted helmet, a Lux Stone hollow, and 8 Umbari ingots. Since I do have access to this tier, we can actually take a look at the multiple outputs of this. So you do have the versatile master crafted helmet, which has 1 primary essence and 2 basic essence slots. And then you have the durable version of it, which is a primary, vital, and basic. You'll notice that the armor values are the same and the base vitality are the same on them. I would assume that this theme is applied through the rest of the tiers as well, but there are some additional recipes through the rest of the tiers as well. So let's take a look at those. Moving into tier 3, we do have to take into consideration that that is going to require the apprentice standing within the guild to acquire the recipe and the Lux Stone socket recipe. Now, the recipes that are visible for the metalsmith seem a little bugged at the moment because both recipes in the tier 3 have different names but show the same output. So I can only imagine that there are some different outputs based on the secondary outputs of each one of those recipes. Much like the previous tier that we could actually take a look at, there's probably some extra vitals thrown in, maybe 1 or 2. We'll have to just see what that looks like when we get further along. There's a side note about the Lux Stone recipes. Each one of them requires an additional Lux Stone when you're crafting them. So the Lux Stone hollow requires 1, the Lux Stone socket requires 2, and the Lux Stone setting requires 3. So moving on to tier 4, we are going to see the same type of thing. We are going to have the tier 4 recipes with their adjacent Lux Stone setting recipe. And we are going to see that they have the multiple output recipes along with the bindings and the additional requirement of the journeyman standing with the guild. One thing I didn't specifically call out in the beginning was that each tier has an additional essence slot. So tier 1 has 2, tier 2 has 3, tier 3 has 4, and tier 4 has 5. So you can see why that this gear is going to be very valuable, just because you're going to be able to really stack in the essences and really tweak your build how you want to. So just some extra thoughts on this as we kind of wrap this video up. I think out of the gate, the system can be pretty confusing for people because there are so many outputs and there's different tiers and the different bindings and the different statuses. So make sure that you are watching what you're doing, because this currency is harder to come by and you really don't want to be wasting it and putting yourself, you know, potentially a week behind because you spent a lot of currency on the wrong recipe or something like that. I think overall the system has some potential to be pretty cool. We'll have to see how it implements further on. They are talking about it in the actual article about how it will progress further. Obviously, we only have journeymen standing right now, and usually there are further standings than journeymen. So I would imagine later in the expansion or later years, we would see additional pieces of gear coming out and higher Lux Stone recipes and things like that. I do hope that we have more ways of getting Lux Stones other than just the weekly quest wrapper for the Umbar Guild and the Forester event. I think things like this can be a little tough on the overall community because there's, like I said, there's a lot of it. There's not a whole lot of explanation on it. There is the article on LOTRO.com, but once you get in game, it's sadly very easy to make a mistake, and that can be pretty discouraging. This is another one of those systems also that, since it was introduced with Corsairs of Umbar, it isn't complete, and there still seem to be some issues with it, with certain tooltips not representing things correctly and some crafts not actually having things to do. I will say, as a whole, it is a pretty minimally invasive system where you don't have to do a whole lot. You know, if you do your daily, which doesn't take much time at all, and you do 5 of those, you know, in a week's time, you're going to get about 120 of the currency to spend on these. It all depends on your reputation. But like I said, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to do it. It's just when you start crafting the actual items, you really want to pay attention to what you're doing. The one thing I have noticed overall with the Umbar Guild situation is it does use a ton of resources. So whether you're crafting, and it seems like the Umbar tier as a whole kind of uses a lot more resources as well. So I guess that's kind of by design. So I know there's a lot of information in here, and there's a lot of different little intricacies with it. So I hope that this video helps you get a better understanding of how to proceed with the upgradable gear. And hopefully you are going to be able to make something that is pretty powerful for yourself. Again, as always, let me know what you think about this system down in the comments below. I always love hearing from you guys and seeing what you have to say about things. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Take care.